So today's lecture is the second last lecture we have in the course. The lecture we have next week is our final lecture, and it's just going to be on the final exam. So next week's lecture is like just the final exam. Today's lecture is all about kind of a little bit of, I guess, a Q&A for React. So kind of a quick recap. In week 7, we talked about ReactJS. We gave you an intro to it. We did our week 4 demo, but we did it, with, week 7 code, i.e. React. And then last week in week 8, we kind of started assignment 3 together. And we gave you like a big boost and a whole bunch of code, and I uploaded the code. You can go and find the code. If you haven't seen the code already, you can just come down and find the lecture right here, and you can access the code. There's a zip file right there. It's all very accessible. And then next week, we're just talking about the final exam. But this week's a little bit of a light week. Should be a fairly short lecture, actually, because last week's lecture, we kind of went overtime. We spent, nearly 2.5 hours kind of effectively doing a ton of stuff. And this week is just about answering questions people have. Now, I did make a forum post about week 9 lecture content requests, and I didn't get a lot of interest from it. So tonight we're going to be relying on the interest of people live in the lecture, as well as these 2 comments here. So in terms of these 2 comments we see here, I actually can kind of address them pretty quickly. So Shangji asked a really interesting question, but it's not something we're going to go into too much depth with. And the question here is, can we please talk about 1, customized React hooks, and 2, a closer look at React mechanisms such as state management and the complete rendering lifecycle. So firstly, custom hooks are actually a super... I don't even think we have a lecture on it. There was just a tutorial question that one of the tutors was really interested in writing. And it's not something that I'm probably going to go to in any detail in core lectures, but it is considered an extended topic. So, like 95% of students do 6080 and never deal with custom hooks. Custom hooks are essentially just, and we built a couple of these at work. You have your hooks like your use effect and your use state that are kind of built into React. And then when you use libraries like React Router DOM, you got things like use navigate, use location, use history, I think. Some hooks like that. You can kind of go and make your own hooks if you'd really like to. But generally, again, for the sake of this assignment, that's absolutely overkill. So we probably won't do anything with custom hooks. And then to the second part, larger scale ReactJS applications. So when ReactJS was kind of first gaining traction, it did quite a lot of good things. But I guess 2 big things that it didn't do super well out of the box were routing, which is why, the React Router DOM library is so popular. And then the second one was state management across the app. Because the use state hook and React state management is really good when it comes to managing component state. Because your React app is like a series of components. But as we kind of saw last week, that gets really complicated when you want to share information between components. Now, how do you share information between components? Well, there's actually a lecture on this that you can go and watch. I think it's the use context lecture. And what we talk about in this lecture, just a quick recap, because a bunch of you might not have watched it or might not be there yet, is that there's really 3 ways to manage state across an entire application. The first one is to pass props down through components. Sorry, it's to pass state and state functions down through components via props. That's what we did last week, where you have you kind of have the state in component 1 and you pass it down to subsequent components. The second one is to well, that's kind of 4. Let me say that the 0th one is to use local storage, right? But that's not really scalable for a bunch of reasons. One is, everything in local storage has to be a string, which means, you're either going to have to store a whole bunch of strings or you're going to have to kind of JSONify things. It's not really designed to kind of be read to and from all the time. I assume that there's a lot of data. I assume that local storage is on disk. I'm not sure what caching there is. It's not a scalable way to manage state across an app. Local storage is not designed to share data between components. It was designed to store information when you weren't using the web app anymore, right? Like once you close the web app. So that's 0, local storage. Number 1's passing props down. Most of the time, that's actually not a bad idea. It's actually kind of a really good idea if you truly are just passing it through a couple of components. The only times that you probably want to veer away from that is when you're just dealing with information that is like so persistent, like maybe the user's name or the token or maybe a list of users, like in our application at work, right? This application that we build, we just use state for nearly everything, but there are a few things in the app itself, like the customer's name, the customer's user ID. That's kind of maybe the 2 of the biggest things that you just kind of use in all the components everywhere, in particular the customer ID, right? Because like with a customer ID, if you're using an app with a customer, it's a bit like the Slacker app. It's just so easy to kind of use that in every component because lots of different components might make lots of fetches separately. So sometimes this one breaks down, and that's where we get into these methods 2 and 3. And the first method is to use React's use context hook. React's kind of built-in state management is a little bit janky. It's probably improved in the 12 months since I've last looked at it. Things kind of improve super fast in this space. But it does work, and that's why I have done a lecture on it here on use context, which you can go and watch. We're not going to watch it now, obviously, because we're here together. Oh, look at that. Look at that untamed hair. But it works, and we give you all the sample code for it. So your life couldn't be easier. So super good. Now, the last method, the third method of the 4, is using what you call a state management tool. And 2 really popular state management tools are MobX and Redux. And you can kind of Google them. These are just NPM libraries, right? Like you can install them just like React Router DOM. They're really popular. I've used both. I don't really have a preference because I've never used both extensively. The first applications I built were built with Redux, which is, I think, still the most popular. And then MobX is definitely one that we use now. And, Redux is hugely popular. I'm not too sure what the differences are off the top of my head. I feel like, I don't know if MobX had something to do with mobile. Probably not. But, they both achieve the same thing, which is they kind of do a slightly better, more scalable version of what something like the use context hook does, where you essentially can just create state and share them between components. Now, I kind of think that for, assignment 3, and for the assignments we get you to do in this course, using MobX or your Redux is kind of overkill. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's just too involved. Now, if you're interested in it, obviously go ahead. To your heart's content, go and apply it. But what I'd probably say is in the topic of state management, I would just stick to use context if you're an average student. But if you find yourself with a ton of time, and lots of hobbying to do, then yeah, go ahead and go learn and try and apply MobX or Redux. It's probably quite interesting. A whole bunch of you are like, I know there's a bunch of people here that are Canva aspiring students, you know, I think I'll probably first make the disclaimer that there are lots of cool companies out there, not just Canva. Canva's amazing. They do cool work, and they're always hiring, and they're growing. They're a very successful startup, but there are lots of cool companies that you can all go work for with these wonderful skills that you're learning in this course. Though, you know, if you do really desperately, like I know there's always a few students who are just like, I'm going to work at this company. That's my dream. Then, you know, maybe if you have some spare time, it might be worth going and playing around with a library that they use. Not because they'd expect you to use it, but, you know, interviews and, you know, sometimes it's just good to say, you know, that you know these things. To the other question from Chun, can we talk more about mobile responsiveness using the Material UI library? Now, I really like this question because the Material UI library is actually like kind of responsive out of the box, and it's one of the reasons why it's great to use. And what I mean by that is if we go and find some, say, form inputs, right, like a text field, and we look at, I don't know, we look at something here, you'll see that if I resize the window, these text inputs are actually all kind of designed to be responsive already, you know, and this is kind of out of the box. There's not like a whole bunch of extra code here. So using Material UI, you don't actually need to worry too much about the mobile responsiveness of components if you keep your pages really simple. And that's good for you because that's less effort. But let's say you're a student. Let's say you're watching this lecture. It's Sunday of week 9. You know, it's the 13th of November. You've barely started assignment 3, and you're starting to panic. You're starting to go, oh my God, I don't know anything. I don't know where to start. You know where you could start? Well, you could start with on Eccles. If you go to the bottom left, you go find the source code of Eccles. You go in the front end folder. You go and you clone this repo. Remember, this is all public. I built this website myself, the entire thing myself, not that it's that big, for the purpose of giving you the source code so that you can literally come along, you can clone it, you can go inside the front end folder, you can yarn or npm, doesn't really matter. I think I did this one with npm. Give it a moment. React apps are pretty big, so it takes a sec. The thing is, I think using Material UI in terms of responsiveness is actually really easy. I think the hardest part is getting the core page layout. So for instance, when I built this site, it was actually really easy because, you know, these are all flex. So as this site gets bigger and smaller, you know, these components just shrink and grow. Most of the pages are all just kind of single. Let me take you through the app then. Maybe that's the right thing to do here. Ugh. Still going. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't really need to wait for this because this is just to show you that you can run it too. But let's take a look at the site. So, when I first built this, I really built it with 3 components. The header bar up here, which I wanted to have the logout and the ability to open and collapse the menu, and a title. I built the sidebar, which I knew was always going to be about the same size. And I had the main body. And the idea was pretty simple. I was like, okay, well, it's just going to be like that. But then at a certain point, I'm going to hide the sidebar by default. So now the sidebar is kind of like hidden until it's opened, as opposed to open until it's hidden, right? Now, in the code that I wrote, all that really was just, and maybe we can find it. Let's try it out. I probably wrote this I think I wrote this last Christmas or something. So I don't remember a lot. Let's look at page, maybe site.jsx. Here you go. So there's a bit of code here. I have a function called check and change width, and all this does is, let's see where it's called. So you can see here that what I did was I used a use effect on the whole. This is like the main component at the top. I put an event listener on resize. So in the app resized, what happened was it called my check and change width function. I also had it call it immediately when, you know, the page loads, because like you kind of want it to apply, like check as soon as the page loads. So this function was called, and all this function did was it set the screen width to the window's inner width. And then it said, well, if we're a mobile width, and this was just, I don't even know what this function was. It's probably not very exciting. Let me check. I clearly abstracted it to another file called screen. Yep, these were simple functions. Is mobile width just checked if it's less than 850? Is desktop width checked if it's greater than 1000? It's pretty simple, right? So if it's mobile width, hide the sidebar. If it's desktop width, show the sidebar. I don't use an else statement here, because one thing that's really helpful about this, and this is just a bit of general knowledge, is that I learned this from my time in robotics. One thing you try and avoid with thresholds is making decisions on a threshold. So if you kind of have something that's like, well, if it's less than 850 pixels, hide it. And if it's more than 850 pixels, show it. The problem is when you get to that 850 pixels, if someone's screen is like very small, like what can happen is that it can kind of like, maybe I can even show you. Let's see if it works. Yarn. Oops. Yarn start. I'll just spool it up here. Okay, just trying to, 1 sec. Okay, so here's Eccles. Cool. And now I can load up this. So obviously, now, granted, this doesn't work out of the box unless you run the server. So we probably need to try and run the server. And I haven't checked if it still works. It might be broken. But let's try it out. Might npm install this one. Server's much smaller. It probably won't work. I haven't tried to run this locally in a while. That's not good. I can't remember what the login is. Sample. Oh, Z555. Password? Sample? Oh, wow. Look, it still works. How magical is that? You can do this. You can literally do this. You can literally go and run the course website locally, right? I spent a lot of time making it work that way for you, which is fine. I wouldn't use it if I was a student, but I was kind of like, maybe this is helpful. But the point is that let's imagine that I edit the source code here and I edit this screen file, or actually I look at my site.jsx, right? Let's imagine that I just changed this, and instead of this desktop width thing here, I just had like an else. So I said, you know what? If it's mobile width, close it. If it's desktop width, open it. But this kind of creates a weird situation, which you'll see where it kind of like it can kind of fluctuate, which can be very, it's not doing it. I'm not sure why that is even kind of working. That probably shouldn't work like that. But the point is, there's this idea of using a hysteresis in robotics, which is basically saying that, you know, your light switches do this if you pay attention. That's why it's really hard for modern light switches for you to like hold it in the middle and for the light to flicker, because you kind of have to, I'm explaining this terribly, but it's like, you know, if you kind of have to, you know, move it from here to here, there's not a point in the, I'll draw it. There's not like a point in the middle necessarily. So if here's your light switch and here's like the angle to turn it off on, right? So you imagine you have like a light switch like this, and you like rotate it up to turn it off, right? And then it's off on this side. If this is like on and this is off, then the point where it turns on might be here, and the point where it turns off might be here. So you kind of have to go too far to turn it on. And then if you just like, so once you get, if you move it up here, you get here and it turns on, but if you go back slightly, it's still on. It only turns off when you get there. So it avoids that kind of flickering. So that's kind of like why this is set like this, because what this, maybe I had to refresh the page or something. But what this means now is that when this pops up, I have to go back to 850 to close it. And then when I have to go back to 1000 to open it. Now, I'm not saying that's a perfect thing to do. I'm more just explaining a concept that you probably haven't thought about too much. Um, so, what was I going to explain? Yes, so all I really did here was just hide and show the sidebar because set sidebar open. I used the use context thing from lectures, which you can go steal again. So whether the sidebar was shown or not was actually just a state variable. And when the page got really small, that's all that happened was the sidebar was hidden. Eventually the site had a minimum size. That was really all there was to it. There wasn't a lot there. It was really super simple. Probably the one exception was that a lot of these tables that I made were quite big. So for mobile, obviously the removal of the sidebar helped a lot. But another thing I did was that once we got below certain thresholds, I started hiding fields. That's why you'll notice as we get really small, fields kind of hide. And all that was just some conditionality. So let's say I open up, content lectures or something. There's a little bit of abstraction in the code that I wrote. Goodness. Yeah, so you'll see here that oh, that's a single page. Content lectures by topic or something. By week. Goodness. Generate content. Oof. Look at me trying to go and understand my old code. Content lectures. This kind of looks like it, but I'm not sure where the code is that hides stuff. Not sure. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's a bit abstract. Yeah, so like I just defined it here and said, well, when you're looking for lectures, a lecture has a name. I don't know what second column name is. It has like a topic or week. That's because like on Eccles you can view stuff by like topic or week, but otherwise it's the same page. But it says here that for duration and links, you only show it, for instance, if it's not half screen width, and then you only show the links if it's not tiny. So that's why as it gets bigger, as it becomes not tiny, the links appear, and then as it gets not half a page, the duration appears, That was it. That's like as deep as I got into mobile responsiveness for Eccles' website, because that's all you kind of need, because the Material UI components largely dealt with themselves. So once the basics were there wasn't a lot else to do. So, but again, you can go and clone this. You can literally, my message to the person who was starting this assignment on Sunday, the 13th of November, was you can just go and clone the Eccles site, and you can just go and actually like copy it. You could literally strip it all out, like use the code. You can use all the code from it. It's public on the internet. You're allowed to use it. It's like the one piece of code we let you kind of copy or plagiarize. And it was literally originally built back last Christmas break to help students that felt like React was too big and to give them kind of like a template to start with. Now, obviously there are a lot of templates out there on the internet. You've got all your, Ant Design and Material UI has templates themselves, but this is just one of the ways that we can help you. Now, that's kind of all I have to add today. We did cover a lot of the basics of React last week. We have some people in the live lecture here, so we can wrap up early if there's just literally no one has any questions about anything, because I know you've all got a lot of work to do. But just to the people in the live lecture, do you have any questions about React Assignment 3 that you want to go through or you want to ask? Tanya, I can see that you're using a lot of MUI components. That's Material UI, if I've ever used that acronym before. Are we allowed to use that many? Yeah, you can use as many as you'd like. Absolutely. I used a lot. I mean, I built Eccles not like I wanted it to do certain things, but I didn't care how it looked. I just wanted to get it built quick. I had some simple ideas, which is that I wanted lectures listed with slides and that you could look at it by topic or by week, and tutorials you could There's probably some linking problems there. Yeah. But you know, tutorials and stuff that you could see. Yeah, I had some goals and that was it. It was pretty simple. Pigeon says, are there some UI framework recommendations other than MUI? Look, I haven't used a ton. I've used Material UI, I've used Semantic UI, I've used Bootstrap, you know, Bootstrap React. Bootstrap's got their own, like, you know, NPM library for React. It's probably, yeah, it probably comes up for React. I'm not sure if it works for all libraries. Maybe this is just like a generic one. Maybe this just includes the source code. Yeah, React Bootstrap. This is the one you'd want. Semantic UI, I haven't used that one in years. There's probably a bunch more. I don't think this one is as popular at all. I can't remember what the difference with Semantic UI is. Based on the really quick description, I'm trying to remember. I think this is one of them's the Google UI, or that's, I don't remember the naming. But yeah, you can kind of use any of them. They're the three I know off the top of my head. Mike says, is that all the components that we found online can be used in assignment 3? Yeah, like literally anything. Like, this is the thing about assignment 3 that in a lot of ways makes it easier than assignment 2. Assignment 2 felt like it was average to start and then just average to hard to finish. Whereas assignment 3 should feel like it's hard to start because React can be quite like a, you know, mountain to climb when you're getting started. But then it gets easier because you just like bash through it because you can use components and you can use NPM libraries. You know, I'm sure, like, you know, I think, for instance, as an example, I think on the lecture single page, I use the, maybe I don't. Maybe I just thought I was gonna, well, I have a YouTube component. No, I made my own. Okay, that's a bad example. You can use tons of libraries, you know, like I'm pretty sure there's like React NPM stars rating or something. React rating stars component. It's probably could be crap. Only 18,000 people download it a week. There you go. Look at that. You can literally just npm install this and include it on your app. Then you'll have this cute little multi-star thingy dig, you know, where you can rate things. How cute's that? You can probably just go change the color pretty easily. Come along here and be like, oh, maybe I'll go like black and yellow for like UNSW colors or something. There we go. Easy. You know, one less thing to do. But I mean, you know, these might not be SVGs, which we did ask for, so maybe this wasn't the best example. Maybe they are SVGs. Maybe you can get away. Oh, they are SVGs, you get away with it. Oh, good. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Well, let's stop there then. One more short lecture next week. Stay strong. We're nearly at the end. Once you submit assignment 3, you've done like 3/4 of the course. So you're really well on the way. If you do have any questions, please post on the forum. The team's always here to help. You know, good luck. I think it is the latest we've had assignment 3 due. So that extra time's hopefully helpful next week. And yeah, here to help. So have a good night, everyone. Thank you for tuning in.